Picture a map of Europe at night. Cities glow, trade routes hum, and in the upper right, a hard line of darkness presses against a country that never blinks. That line is 1,340 kilometers long. On one side, Russia. On the other, Finland, a nation that learned long ago that peace is something you build with shovels, shelters, and a lot of artillery. This isn't a hot take or a Cold War fantasy. This is the new strategic north. And in that cold, bright space, Finland might just be the most important military power you're not thinking about yet. The secret is geography, but not the postcard kind. Finland's border with Russia is more than a line on a map. It's a non-stop masterclass in deterrence. The terrain is a chessboard of forests, lakes, and muskeg that swallows armor and exhausts infantry. The winters don't punish mistakes, they turn them into headlines. For NATO, Finland now anchors the northern flank like a glacier. Slow, immovable, impossible to ignore. Plug Finland into the alliance, and the Baltic Sea starts looking less like a Russian neighborhood watch and more like a NATO cul-de-sac with good lighting and ploughed roads. If the Northern Front ever mattered, it matters now. To understand why this matters, roll back to 1939. The Winter War was 26 weeks of snow, fire, and a nation refusing to be erased. Outnumbered and outgunned, Finnish forces taught a brutal lesson. Terrain, training, and willpower don't show up on the balance sheet until they ruin it. Ski troops ghosted through the woods, anti-tank teams with bottles and grit turned road-bound columns into metal hedgehogs. The continuation war that followed wasn't romantic. It was grim and pragmatic, and it hammered home a permanent lesson. Survival requires preparation, and preparation is a whole-of-society project. Finland's military culture still speaks that language. Quiet, competent, allergic to chest thumping. That's why conscription in Finland isn't nostalgia, it's infrastructure. Universal service for men, voluntary for women, with a system designed less like a boot camp and more like a national machine shop. When Finland says it can mobilize 280,000 soldiers for wartime, it's not bravado, it's logistics. Behind that is a reserve pool approaching 900,000. Names, not guesses, connected to units, roles, and terrain they actually know. And the social contract is robust. Around 4 out of 5 Finns say they'd defend the country if needed. That's not jingoism, that's civic competence. As one Finnish conscript allegedly put it, we don't do drama, we do the job. Also, coffee. Always coffee. If the Finnish defense doctrine had a tagline, it would be, "Welcome to the forest, please stay forever." The plan is to slow, split, and tire an adversary until momentum dies of hyperthermia. Every lake is an obstacle, every bog a puzzle, every tree line a hypothesis that ends with an ambush. Finland trains for this like it's a national sport. Arctic warfare isn't a course, it's a habit. Soldiers learn to become winter ghosts. Camouflage isn't white cloth, it's attitude. Engines are warmed like athletes. Logistics routes are mapped in layers, not lines. If you've ever heard the term winter ninja, it's not a joke, it's the operating system. The humor comes later, around a field stove, when someone points out that minus 20 Celsius is just crisp. The first time you hear that, you think they're kidding. They're not. Of course, no doctrine works without the tools, and Finland's toolbox is heavy. It is widely known as having the largest artillery park in Western Europe. And what matters more than bragging rights is how that artillery is integrated, dispersed, mobile, and fed by precision fire control. We're talking hundreds upon hundreds of tubes and rocket systems that turn dense woodland into an ally. You don't see a parade of guns, you see a network. Add to that a fleet of over 200 Leopard 2 tanks, some modernized, all maintained with a northern obsession for reliability. K9 Thunder self-propelled howitzers add speed and survivability to the big gun picture, while modern infantry fighting vehicles, think CV-90s and Patria platforms, carry the punch through snow, mud, and wherever the road politely declines to exist. Then there's the air domain. Finland's choice to transition to 64 F-35s wasn't trend chasing, it was math. Long distances, low light skies, and an enemy that respects only what it fears. Stealth and sensors win that calculation. The F-35s don't just add air superiority, they fuse the battlefield, increasing the lethality of everything else on the ground. A battery of howitzers with good eyes becomes a sniper. A mechanized company with a digital guardian angel becomes a trap. As for the outgoing FA-18s, they're not leaving in shame. They're retiring, like veteran hockey players, scarred, respected, and still perfectly willing to check anyone foolish enough to forget they're there during the transition period. Air defense. Finland treats it like a religion. NASAMS provides the backbone for layered protection. while the acquisition of David's Sling adds a high-altitude umbrella against longer-range threats. The principle remains: make the airspace poisonous to anything that isn't invited. That includes cruise missiles, drones, and other party crashers. The Finns don't chase after the threat of the weak. They build a ceiling and a floor, and then find ways to thicken both. It's not flashy, it's survivable.
Now turn to the sea. Finland's navy doesn't flex tonnage, it flexes design. The new Pohjanmaa-class corvettes are stealthy, multi-role, and built for the Baltic like a seal born in shallow water. The Baltic isn't the Pacific. It's a complex basin where shallow depths, narrow lanes, and harsh conditions punish bad decisions. Finnish ships are designed to fight there, to hide there, and to deny it to anyone who thinks the Gulf of Finland is a convenient shortcut. Coastal missile batteries and mine warfare capabilities knit the picture together. The message is simple: the shoreline is not a boundary, it is a weapon. All of this would matter in any era, but in the present, it matters more. Finland's shift from careful neutrality to NATO membership wasn't a branding exercise, it was a strategic pivot with immediate effects. The northern flank now runs unbroken from the Norwegian Sea to the Gulf of Finland. Logistics corridors through Sweden and Norway can be planned, tested, and exercised under one umbrella. Air policing becomes air integration. If you're in the alliance and thinking about reinforcement timelines, Finland shortens them. If you're in the alliance and thinking about deterrence at scale, Finland thickens it. If you're not in the alliance and thinking about opportunism, Finland ruins your calendar. Participation in international missions isn't an afterthought either. Finnish troops have carried blue helmets, EU mandates, and NATO flags in places where the weather is the least of your problems. That gives them two gifts: interoperability and humility. When a Finnish platoon leader briefs a joint staff, they come with common vocabulary and uncommon caution. That's a good combination for coalitions and a terrible one for adversaries who rely on confusion. Now let's talk money, because spreadsheets do not win wars, but they certainly equip the people who do. Finland spends around 2% of GDP on defense, which in practical terms means a steadily modernizing force that keeps the lights on and the shelves stocked. The budget is not a blank check, but it's not a bouncing one either. Plans point toward growth over the next decade, into the double-digit billions by the early 2030s. More important than totals is discipline. Finland buys what it needs for the fight it expects, not for the parade it doesn't host. If defense budgeting were a television genre, Finland would be a cooking show. Everything portioned, labeled, and exactly ready when the oven dings. There's another ledger that matters even more: psychology. The Finns call it sisu, a kind of stoic, stubborn grit that resists translation because it prefers action over words. It shows up in national defense surveys, in volunteer organizations, in the civic rituals of preparedness. Civil defense isn't a dusty archive, it's a living infrastructure. Shelters exist, stocks exist, redundancy exists. Most cities could look at Helsinki's underground facilities and take notes. And while nobody wishes for the stress test, Finland treats the possibility like winter: inevitable, survivable, and less dangerous if you dress for it. All these threads tie back to a single strategic impact. Plug Finland into NATO's northern arc and the alliance gains not just territory, but time. Time to reinforce the Baltic states. Time to close the Suwałki Gap with logistics that aren't theoretical. Time to turn the Arctic from a warning light into a dashboard. Finland's presence changes the psychology of the region too. It tells friends that Europe can learn and adapt. It tells adversaries that the cost of bad ideas just went up. And it tells anyone paying attention that small countries with serious plans move big maps. Before we roll into modernization details, a quick conscript life aside, because it says a lot about the culture. In a land where every other month seems to be February, learning to ski while wearing half your body weight is character building. The training is tough, but focused. Navigation at night in a forest maze? Routine. Building field saunas? Also routine. A platoon that can erect a tent sauna in a snowstorm will probably manage a logistics site under fire. And yes, someone always makes the joke that the sauna is really a thermal camouflage module. It's funny the first time. It's true every time. Modernization isn't a shopping list. It's an ecosystem. Finland's artillery network is being digitized for faster targeting and survivability. The K9 howitzers integrate with fire direction systems that don't just shoot faster, they think faster. The Leopard 2 fleet receives upgrades in optics and protection. IFVs receive sensors and comms that blur the line between recon and infantry. Drones, both small and smart, fold into this picture for reconnaissance and strike support. And ammunition stocks, those quiet, forgotten heroes, are planned like lifelines. The biggest lesson from recent wars is brutally simple. The side that can shoot, move, and still keep shooting usually wins. Finland prepares to be that side. Air power, as we said, is entering a new era with the F-35. That means an overhaul in basing concepts too. Dispersed operations are the default. Roads become runways. Forests become parking spots for jets that don't need the spotlight to be deadly. Fuel, munitions, and maintenance are pre-staged. If you've ever wondered what a porcupine Air Force looks like, imagine fighters popping up where aircraft aren't supposed to be, taking a clean shot and vanishing back into the tree line. It's glamorous only to logisticians and pilots with a sense of humor. Fortunately, Finland has both. Missile defense integration is also getting sharper. With NASAMS at the core and David's Sling entering the stack, the air picture becomes layered in altitude and networked in decision-making. The point isn't to create an impenetrable dome, that's a fantasy. The point is to create dilemmas. Force an opponent to spend more munitions for fewer results. Make every flight path risky, every timing assumption wrong. Throw in electronic warfare and decoys, because the Finns never met a trick they didn't want to test, and you get airspace that bites back. At sea, the new corvettes bring a kind of grown-up subtlety to Baltic operations. They carry serious sensors and missiles, yes, but their biggest weapon is that they were designed by people who operate in that water every day. Sea denial, convoy escort, anti-submarine patrols in tricky acoustics. This is their arena. Add coastal defenses and mine warfare, and any adversary looking to thread the Baltic needle will find it bent, barbed, and inconveniently Finnish. The Navy's culture mirrors the Army's, calm, deliberate, and profoundly unimpressed by swagger. Internationally, Finland's role will only grow. In NATO exercises, Finnish units are already the ones who know every shortcut that isn't on the map. They're the ones who bring cold weather playbooks that turn stumbling blocks into opportunities. The alliance needs that, not just in a crisis, but to shape daily readiness, because the North is no longer a corner case, it's a theater. In the EU and UN context, Finland remains the adult in the room who brings a packed lunch and a contingency plan. That may not trend on social media, but it pays dividends when the phone rings at 3 a.m. Let's circle back to spending and deterrence, because this is where Finland quietly breaks the stereotype. The notion that only massive militaries deter is outdated. What deters is the credible ability to stop the specific opponent in the specific place where they would try to act at a price they don't want to pay. Finland's 2% of GDP isn't a vanity metric. It's a promise of readiness that translates into plan, training, and stockpile. Projections moving toward roughly $11.5 billion by the early 2030s suggest consistency, not panic. This is deterrence as a marathon with nasty sprints built in, not as a shopping spree with a hangover. You also can't talk about Finland without mentioning cyber. In the 21st century, the first skirmish is often invisible and happens at the speed of code. Finland invests in cyber defense with the same methodical temperament it applies to winter tires. Networks are hardened, public-private sharing is normal. Exercises fold cyber disruption into physical drills because the Finns assume that if something can be jammed, spoofed, or hacked, someone will try. It's not paranoia, it's paperwork. And it means that when the lights flicker, the plan doesn't. If you're looking for weaknesses, Finland will save you time by pointing them out themselves. That's the culture. Logistics corridors are long, populations are dispersed, winters test machines as much as people. But each problem is countered with layered, often boring solutions. The kind that never make headlines until they prevent one. Stockpiles of spare parts, fuel caches, rail mobility rehearsed in mud and ice, and the unglamorous business of maintaining things so they work when summoned. The joke in some units is that the Finnish word for innovation is maintenance schedule. It isn't, but you get the point. So why, among larger, louder militaries, might Finland be the most important? Because it sits exactly where the map pinches, it remembers what forgetting costs, and it has quietly built a force that makes aggression look like a terrible investment. In a Europe relearning the basics, Finland never forgot them. That's power, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Let's dive deeper into the engine room. Conscription as a national operating system. Finnish conscripts typically serve between half a year and nearly a year depending on role. That time isn't just push-ups and rifle drills. It's a human API plug-in, teaching a generation how command, logistics, communications, and survival actually work. Women join voluntarily and do so in growing numbers, not as tokens, but as professionals in the making. When service ends, the connection does not. Reservists rotate through refreshers. Units keep rosters and readiness. The mobilization framework is a living organism. And when Finland says 280,000 can be mobilized quickly, they mean with officers, NCOs, vehicle keys, and maps that aren't still at the printer. The reserve depth, approaching 900,000, isn't a flex for social media. It's a strategic cushion. It allows the force to absorb shocks, rotate units, and maintain operations in a long fight without bleeding away skills or tempo. It's deterrence you can't photograph. The knowledge that behind every company in the field is another company in the pipeline, and a battalion that knows exactly which road to take at 3 a.m. in February. It's the difference between a sprint and a sustainable grind. Doctrine is where this all becomes artful. The forests and lakes are not obstacles to be bulldozed. They're allies to be cultivated. Units trained to use ice, snowpack, and terrain, masking the way others use urban cover. Bridges are mapped for demolition as carefully as routes are mapped for crossing. Anti-armor tactics are layered, from long-range fires that slow, to close-in teams that stop, to obstacles that channel. Every road through the woods becomes a story with a bad ending for someone reckless. And because Finland expects operations under electronic attack, the doctrine assumes friction. Paper maps still exist. Runners still train. Radios are hardened, but so are habits. The winter ninja reputation isn't a meme, it's a feedback loop. Skills learned early, skiing, orienteering, machine maintenance in cold, scale up in uniform. A platoon moving swiftly on skis with rucks and rifles is not cinematic. It's expected in some units. The goal is not to outsuffer the enemy for bragging rights. The goal is to outfunction them until they collapse from their own logistical debt. Cold weather doesn't care who started the fight. It cares who brought the right gloves and who knows how to keep batteries warm. Let's talk firepower with a bit more texture. Finland's artillery isn't just numerous, it's modern where it counts. Sensors, counter-battery radars, and tightly integrated command systems allow rapid massing of fires from dispersed locations. Shoot and scoot isn't a trick, it's the baseline. K9 Thunder howitzers bring speed and armored protection, while towed pieces remain relevant in the places where wheels can't go and tracks don't want to. Rocket artillery layers the deep strike. Mortars, often overlooked, stitch close fights together in the woods where line of sight is more rumor than reality. And the ammunition philosophy is simple. Bring more than you think you need, then bring a little extra. No one ever complained that the fire mission ended too soon, except the person on the wrong end of it. Armored forces are tuned for the north. Leopard 2s offer the punch and protection, but their value is in the crews that treat maintenance like religion. The best armor is availability. CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles provide mobility and fire support with sensors that play well in the dark. Patria-designed vehicles, including 8x8 platforms, do what they were built to do: carry infantry, survive harsh roads, and not ask for pity from the weather. And just as important, recovery and engineering units train constantly to pull machines out of the kinds of holes that surprise maps in April. The Air Force's creeping transformation to the F-35 is less a swap than a software update to the entire defense network. With stealth and high-end sensors, the jets become a reconnaissance and targeting grid, improving ground fires and intercept timing. Dispersed basing, the famous practice of using road bases, is an old Finnish trick with new teeth. It complicates enemy planning to the point of paralysis. If every straight stretch of highway could be a runway, and every forest hide could be a hardened shelter in disguise, you don't target an airbase, you target a country. Good luck with that. Air defense integrates horizontally as well as vertically. NASAMS batteries layer with point defense systems and are linked to a national picture feeding on radar sites that are themselves hardened and redundant. David's Sling adds reach and altitude against the kind of threats that make smaller systems nervous. In drills, Finland treats air defense like a team sport. The goal is not to swat every incoming projectile. The goal is to protect critical assets, preserve freedom of action, and force the attacker into bad trades. If they have to launch 3 to get 1 through, they can run out of 3 faster than Finland runs out of resolve. At sea, the Navy's approach to mines is textbook for the Baltic. Mines don't make headlines, but they make problems, especially in shallow, congested waters where acoustic conditions mock large sonar arrays. Combine that with coastal missile batteries selecting targets from a joint sensor picture, and you get a denial strategy that doesn't depend on a big fleet. It depends on a clever one. The Pohjanmaa-class adds a flexible, modern platform that can lead, hide, and hit, preferably in that order. NATO membership amplifies all of this. The alliance has acquired not just a new border with Russia, but a partner that already knows how to defend it. The shift allows planning that once required diplomatic yoga to become straightforward. Air corridors for reinforcement, rail movement across Scandinavia, shared logistics nodes that can be stocked in peacetime and surged in crisis. These are now practical, not aspirational. Finland also adds credibility to NATO's messaging. Deterrence is not a slogan, it's a budget line, a training calendar, and a warehouse key. On international missions, Finnish troops bring a quiet intensity. In UN operations, where patience is currency, they earn interest. In EU missions, where coordination matters, they behave like the adult who read the email. In NATO settings, they're the ones who ask the awkward question that saves an exercise from becoming theater. This consistency builds trust, and trust is the lubricant of coalitions. It shortens the time between decision and action when hours matter. We should also tackle the narrative of cost-effectiveness head-on. Finland's force is not cheap in the sense of cut rate. It is efficient in the sense of focused. Procurement priorities align with doctrine, sustainment heavy, munitions deep, training real, and exercises constant. There's no desire to gold-plate solutions. The measure of success isn't, do we have the most, but do we have enough of exactly what works here? That's why a nation of modest size can be strategically heavyweight. It isn't trying to do everything, it's trying to do the necessary things without fail. Psychologically, the Finnish model radiates a particular kind of calm deterrence. Public communication during crises is clear and boring. In the best way, panic is treated like a virus, contained by information and inoculated by preparation. Community-level organizations that would be hobbies elsewhere are part of the national backbone. This is how you keep resilience from becoming a buzzword. You make it visible, trainable, and a little bit ordinary. The result is a country that has already rehearsed bad days so thoroughly that they feel manageable when they arrive. What does all this do to European security? A lot. It undercuts the idea that Europe must choose between soft power and serious defense. Finland proves you can have robust social systems and still maintain a military that no one wants to test. It raises the bar for readiness in the north, which ripples east and south. It strengthens the credibility of Article 5 by anchoring a flank that used to be a patchwork. And it sends a message to capitals that thought post-Ukraine rearmament would be a sprint. It's a relay. Finland grabbed the baton before most realized the race had started. For the alliance, the practical benefits are immediate. Northern air policing becomes a layered shield. Rapid reaction forces can stage with real options, not stand off with wishful thinking. Intelligence sharing gains a partner that feeds high-quality data from a hard frontier. Exercises become less performative and more like previews of actual plans. And the deterrence equation, capability multiplied by will, gets a multiplier called credibility. Finland doesn't promise, it demonstrates. Now for our bonus chapter, the human side, where humor and hardship meet. Conscript life can be a symphony of small indignities that turn into great stories. The first long ski march, someone packs too much and gravity files a complaint. The first time a recruit's canteen freezes, a corporal hands over a thermos and says, "Plan for physics." Epic fails become epic lessons. Tents that collapse on night 1, so they stand for every night after. Snowshoes put on backwards one time, never again. And the field sauna? It's therapy with steam and sarcasm. If you think these sound trivial, ask any veteran about morale during week 3 of Wet Socks. Jokes don't win wars, but they keep squads together long enough to do the serious part. Cyber defense gets its own punchline too. Somewhere in Helsinki, there's a team whose job is to make sure a bored teenager in a basement doesn't do what a hostile intelligence service already tried. The humor writes itself. The only thing scarier than a nation-state hacker is a conscript who can't find the semicolon. But in practice, Finland's cyber posture is disciplined. It treats every server as potential terrain and every update as a patrol. Drills simulate power outages, comms breakdowns, and data integrity incidents. The payoff is not that nothing breaks, but that nothing that breaks stays broken for long. We should be honest about strategic risk. Proximity to Russia isn't a statistic. It's a daily condition. Escalation ladders are real, and miscalculation is a permanent ghost at the feast. But Finland's approach reduces the likelihood that a small incident becomes a big one. Clear red lines, visible capabilities, and prepared channels, military and diplomatic, make surprises less surprising. Deterrence, after all, is the art of making tomorrow look dull to people who love drama. And that brings us home. If you squint at Europe through a narrow lens, you see larger powers and assume the big names matter most. Look with a strategist's eye and you see keystones, places where a single country holds the shape of the arch. Finland is a keystone. It converts geography from vulnerability into advantage. It turns memory into policy and policy into practice. It sits quietly on the map, a nation of forests and lakes, saying little and preparing much. That is power. The rare kind that does not seek attention because it already has the only audience that matters. Anyone who might think about crossing that long, quiet border. So yes, Finland might be the most important military power, not for its size, but for its fit. Not for its noise, but for its note. It's the instrument the orchestra needs if the symphony is to hold together in the cold. And if history is any guide, when the wind picks up and the lights flicker, the Finns will be where they always are. Already dressed for the weather, already at their stations, already doing the job. Now ask yourself a final question. In a world addicted to surprises, which kind of power would you rather bet on? The one that shouts, or the one that shows up with a plan, a thermos, and a very large artillery park? That's the northern answer, and it just might be the one that keeps the peace.